When you think of Keene, New Hampshire, chances are you think of Main Street. And rightfully so. Main Street is iconic. Dozens of quaint, locally owned shops and restaurants line the wide, clean sidewalks, and 4 lanes of traffic allow it to claim the title of widest Main Street in America, though that claim is often debated. I've always enjoyed Main Street, but at the same time, I've often wondered, did it always look like this? Was it just as picturesque 10, 50, 100 years ago? It got me thinking, just what was Main Street like in the early days of Keene? But as I researched further, a new curiosity formed. I learned that Keene has had a long history of public transportation, longer than I had ever expected. It led me to wonder, just how have Keene's public transportation systems, and by extension, its transportation infrastructure, changed over the years? This was the question I now sought to answer. When you look at an old photograph of Main Street, things don't seem all that different from today. Sure, the road isn't segmented into lanes and the shops aren't the same, but by and large, the buildings and layout are nearly identical. But take a look at the road itself, and you'll see something very different. Tracks. That's right, Keene, New Hampshire once boasted a trolley system. The Keene Electric Railway first started running trams in 1900, 7 years after they first obtained permission from the state. There were 3 routes, one that ran north towards Wheelock Park, one that ran west to Marlborough, and one that ran south to Swansea. All 3 of these routes converged on Main Street. All in all, the 3 routes totaled 8 1/3 miles in length. Extensions further into Swansea and up Washington Street were proposed and permitted, but were never built. Unfortunately, fate would not be kind to the railway line. Ridership was high at first, but after only 3 years of operating, the company saw its first loss. In 1903, the Keene Electric Railway Company lost $2,700, and $3,700 the following year. In 1905, it recorded a profit of only $91. To combat these deficits, the railway intermittently raised its fares, increasing from 5 to 6 cents in 1910 and again to 7 cents in 1918. Additionally, railway maintenance was often neglected to save on overhead. These measures were successful, but not sustainable, and not sufficient to permanently avoid deficit. In total, the railway profited only 14 of the 27 years it operated, meaning it was in the red for nearly half of its lifespan. The Keene Electric Railway came to the end of its line, and in 1926, it finally ended its tram service. The company did not yet close down, though. Rather, they petitioned the city of Keene for permission to motorize. This permission was granted, and midway through 26, the Keene Electric Railway began running buses in place of trams. 3 years later, the Keene Electric Railway shut down. Its legacy lived on, though, in its successor, the Cheshire Transportation Company. We now enter the era of public infrastructure when roads supplanted rails en masse. Replacing the Keene Electric Railway in 1930, the Cheshire Transportation Company was headed by Clarence Wyman, former chairman of the railway, and Lewis Harper, former motorman. Information regarding the company is scarce, so I spoke with Carol Barnes, Lewis Harper's granddaughter, to learn more.
My grandfather and helpers built the buses. The first buses, they held 12 people, and he built them out of wood on the chassis of a Model A Ford truck. And the Keene Electric Railway actually bought them. So the earliest buses said Keene Electric Railway on the side. It was operated in that manner until 1929, when it was changed to Cheshire Transportation and my grandfather and his partner took over the whole of the transportation service on the streets of Keene. It was much better than the electric rail service. It went to a lot more places, and so it was able to help a lot more people get where they needed to go. An awful lot of people worked in factories in Keene at that time, and the factories were all over the place. And so the early service of the electric rail went down only 3 roads. So you had to get to one of those locations in order to have the railway be useful to you. But with the buses, they could go anywhere. But as cars began to be more common, there were fewer people taking the bus just to go downtown to shop or to get to work. When I was growing up, there was still extensive service. But by the time probably 1960 came around, the handwriting was on the wall, and people simply didn't need it the way they used to need it. So the transition was to being an all school bus company. And my father was instrumental in getting school bus contracts, not just for Keene, which they had always done, but for all of the towns around here. And so he had contracts for every major school district around here, as far up as even close to Claremont. And so it really transitioned to just a school bus service. My father's partner and he had separated 2 businesses that they had been involved in. And one was Cheshire Transportation, and the other one was a tire company, which at the time was called H&W Tire. Ted Wyman, who was my father's partner, bought the bus company, and my father bought the tire company, which he then changed the name to Tire Warehouse. Ted ran the bus company for not a long time after that transition. He was older than my father, and he was ready to retire. And so he sold Cheshire Transportation to a school bus company out of Manchester, I believe. I enjoyed being part of the Cheshire Transportation family. I've always been very proud of my grandfather, Lewis Harper, who started the bus company, and my father, who not only worked there all the time that he was growing up, but he managed to keep that company successful at a time when it didn't look like it would be. So that it's a real source of pride for me, and I enjoyed taking the buses too. I thought it was very convenient.
In 1993, the Cheshire Transportation Company ceased providing service to Keene. However, like the Keene Electric Railway before them, they passed the baton to a new transit company. Starting in 1994, Home, Healthcare, Hospice, and Community Services began running their City Express buses. To learn more, I spoke with Susan Ashworth, Director and Community Relations at HCS.
Yet there was a huge need for transportation, particularly among older people in the city of Keene. So Home Healthcare, Hospice, and Community Services began partnering with the Cheshire Transportation Program to see how we could make it run a little bit more frequently so that we would gain the ridership. And in 1994, I believe it was, we took on the entire program of running public transportation in the city of Keene. So we have been running the City Express ever since and trying to retool it so that it could better meet the needs of all citizens, not only the older population, but younger people as well. So we run 2 buses from 8 to 4:30 every single day, Monday through Friday. And with public input, we certainly try to make the route as convenient and reliable for people as we possibly can. You know, in Keene, you can get up Monday through Friday, and if you live along the route, as many of our older people do, you can say, you know what, I think I'm going to go to Market Basket today. I think I'm going to go to Walmart today. I think I'll go to the senior center today and just get yourself to the bus stop. And we have a senior pass, so it's no charge to them. Get on the bus and have the opportunity to get out and really participate in life. The funding has been a constraining factor. At one point, we were running 3 buses that were dedicated to public transportation. Now we've had to cut back to 2 because of funding constraints post-COVID. There's that challenge of trying to get ridership, because ridership really drives the economics of the system. And the other issue is the paradigm shift that people need to make who have always driven their own automobile, gone where they want to go, when they want to go, to adapt people to the system of here's the bus stop, you need to walk to the bus stop, you need to be on time at the bus stop, and your schedule needs to revolve around the bus's schedule is a very different challenge for people to get used to. Certainly, if it were not for this public transportation, people would not have the ability to get around as well as they do. The City Express is giving like 20,000 trips a year. It's the glue. Lots of times people say transportation's the glue that holds life together, because particularly in a rural area, that's how people get around and make connections with the ability to get on the bus and get where they need to go.
The City Express buses are excellent. They provide Keene with cheap and effective public transportation. The company may have had to reduce their service over the years, but I'm grateful that they haven't been forced to close down. Now, there's one final piece of the puzzle to cover. The public infrastructure of Keene is just as important to the story as the transit itself. In recent years, Keene has become well known, even notorious, for its numerous roundabouts. I would even go so far as to say that they are the defining feature of the city's public infrastructure. For further insight, I spoke to Don Lucier, who has been Keene's city engineer since 2016.
Keene was really at sort of the vanguard in New Hampshire of creating roundabouts and using them as a traffic control method. Full disclosure, I am the local roundabout evangelist. I absolutely love them. And I'll be the first to say that they don't always work. They're not a silver bullet in every situation, but they do work just about every time they're tried. And in the right set of circumstances, they work amazingly well. And I think the Upper Winchester Street, the project that we finished last year, is a pretty good example of how they work very, very well. You drive through Winchester Street at rush hour right now, and there's no delay, there's no waiting. You just move right through, nice and calm, 25 miles an hour, and you're good to go. In 2015, the city adopted a complete streets policy. So we try to move the city closer to that sort of goal. The policy, the complete streets policy, spells out a roadway typology for every street in the city, and for each of those typologies, it talks about what we would like to see. So, if it's a bicycle street like Marlborough Street, should have sidewalks on both sides with bike lanes and minimum lane widths and what have you. So everything we do, we look at that and say, can this project be used to move us closer to that sort of aspirational goal, right? Some projects are specifically designed and formulated to achieve that goal. You gave West Street as an example. West Street is in the planning stage. It's actually, we submitted it for funding through the state's transportation funding process, called the 10-year plan. That it will begin design work in 2027 and construction in 2032. So, these projects, we start the planning way in advance. And it takes a long time to get there. But that project is intended to be a complete streets project. So we will be addressing the woeful lack of pedestrian facilities and the fact that the sidewalks on West Street aren't really accessible for anybody with mobility concerns. Bicyclists, unless you're a pretty avid bicyclist, you probably aren't comfortable riding on the roadway in West Street. That project is specifically to address all those concerns. The city council really sets the direction and the goals and the sort of the vision for the future. What they've set for us so far, and what we see as our sort of marching orders. Clearly Keene is, we're environmentally conscious, and we want to be kind and good to the environment and to the climate. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think you're going to continue to see us try to advance things that benefit the environment, that are protective of our natural resources.
Thus ends the story of public transportation and infrastructure in Keene. Its history started out strong with the Keene Electric Railway offering cheap and reliable transit for the city's population. When the railway closed, the Cheshire Transportation Company took its place, replacing buses with trams but retaining the reliable network. But as time wore on and buses became less profitable, public transportation in Keene met its end. Thankfully, with its recent focus on walkable infrastructure and the introduction of the City Express, Keene is making steps in the right direction. Here's hoping it will continue for many years to come.